We're not short of controversy when it comes to news stories emanating from the United States, Simon. Of course, the United States, the venue for this summer's World Cup. So we'll be heading there, and this show will be coming there from there. But now we know that ICE agents, and ICE very much in the news at the moment, are expected to conduct immigration enforcement operations during next month's Super Bowl in Santa Clara, California. Local officials confirmed to the media that ICE is expected to deploy for the game between Seattle Seahawks and the New England Patriots. Homeland Security investigation teams have worked the Super Bowl before, but have previously largely focused on preventing human trafficking and stopping the sale of counterfeit goods. This time, immigration operations would be introduced, and that in itself would be an unusual feature to the presence of ICE. The move, of course, comes amidst scrutiny and criticism over in the US right now after immigration enforcement operations in Minnesota and the killings of 2 US citizens by federal agents. So the ICE going to be in and around the Super Bowl, Simon. Should ICE show up at the World Cup? Should that bother us?
Depends if you're a criminal and doing something wrong. Then if not, no, I don't think so. I mean, I'm not really... I don't feel it's my business to determine what another country does with its own internal desires to secure its border or secure its various mandates that the president's been elected on. In an ideal world, you'd like to think that it doesn't bother the average match-going fan that's supporting his country and going there to watch and celebrate all that goes with the World Cup. And I'm sure that's what it will be. Why it's being deployed, it's been, as you say, it's been deployed before. They deployed in 2017 in Houston. So ICE is not something that's new. It's been around for 25 years. It's been deployed in various sporting events. It just so happens that its deployment now and the currency around this particular president and some of the things that the optics of what they're doing, and of course with 2 people dying, it creates a whole temperature.
Well, that's right. ICE and this current guys is a very different organisation, it would seem.
Well, it would seem to see. Well, first of all, it has a particular task, and I'd like to see a little bit more of robustness in our country about our own policies of protecting our borders.
Yeah, not
and
to the extent they're showing it.
Well, to the extent they're showing it, drive a car at a police officer, see what happens to you. I would imagine that people on one of the bridges, when those terrible attacks were happening in this country, would have suggested that they would have been quite pleased for someone to be shot if they drove a car. And driving a car at somebody is not the ideal way to not get hurt.
Well, we've been hearing that ICE agents will also be deployed at the Italian Winter Olympics next month. So they're kicking up a stink about that. And we've seen them before, have we not? Because when Simon and I engaged with the 2 New York professors, one of them being Heba Goyawed, this was last summer. And this was a conversation we were having. You could call it a conversation, but you make of it what you will. The professors argued that at the Club World Cup in the US, a tournament that Chelsea won, ICE were there and they were operating, and that Trump at that time was using sport as a form of sports washing.
You've got a democratically elected president brought in on a mandate specifically around immigration, to taking hardline policies because he means it, and you're suggesting that ultimately the rest of the world should boycott that on the back of that. I think it's nonsense.
There's a big difference. There's a big difference, okay, between a country being a human rights violator, which every country in the world, right, has a track record. There's no country that's free of any human rights violations.
Correct.
I personally I have not called for the boycott of Qatar. I have not called, even though I despise their policies. I think they're very problematic.
But lots of voices did.
Here, what's happening, I'm not done. Here, what's happening is that he's using this specifically as a platform to amplify these policies. It's the opposite of sports washing. If the
But that's how you see it. But that's how you see it.
We're not Guardian journalists. Actually, we're CUNY professors. But
Fantastic.
if the Guardian editor who had allowed us to write, we had actually called it sports dirting, where it's a use of this platform to amplify certain policies. Now, you might think those are good policies. That's fine. That is your political position. But what I'm talking about are empirical facts, which is the fact of the fan experience, the fact of what's happening outside the stadiums. And those facts do not fit your narrative which is, by the way, a Trump narrative. You're actually repeating his talking points.
Now, I remember that. And when I say we had a conversation with them, it got well and truly heated. And this whole debate is going to arise again, isn't it?
Well, I don't think it got heated.
If we see ice
I don't think it got heated.
pitching up at the World Cup in the summer.
I don't think it got heated. I would have expected professors to understand the meaning of empirical data rather than anecdotal evidence. Because empirical data is a case study over a significant period of time, which provides a very rounded perspective on the information they're putting forward.
They get miffed you called them journalists, I think.
I didn't call them anything. They were introduced to us as potential Guardian journalists. I don't care whether they're professors or journalists.
Right.
The fact of the matter, they can be both, can't they?
Yeah. Well, they'd written a column in the Guardian.
The point is that they suggested that their particular bias towards the policies that Trump was introducing and the dislike of it was supported by empirical data. Well, when I asked them what the empirical data was, it was one World Club Championship game. That is not empirical data. That's anecdotal data. That's anecdotal examples of a particular persuasion and a vantage point. Now, I don't know whether Donald Trump is using sports tournaments to amplify his messaging. I don't think Donald Trump needs to amplify anything. I think he's on the world stage, dawn till dusk. It's Trump watch in every space, in every place, on every media station. So I don't think he really needs the World Cup to do that particular messaging.
Well, we do know that they're going to be deployed at the upcoming Super Bowl in Santa Clara.
They are, as they've got deployed in 2017 in Houston.
And if they do pitch up at the World Cup while we are there in the summer, what's it going to tell us? Is it going to cause, surely, because of recent publicity, it will cause a very...
Well, think about it the other way.
A very nervous feeling around the tournament.
Well, depends
that they may pitch up there, they may pitch up. We don't know where they're going to show up. It'll create an edge.
Depends if you're running around on Ice Watch, blowing whistles at them, which I'm assuming most football fans coming from around the world to watch a football match won't be doing, or driving cars at them. I would assume that ultimately the world media descending upon football matches with these guys in the full glare of it will actually be a different vantage point than the potential scenario where they could be on their worst behaviour. I would imagine they'll be on their best behaviour. So why they're being deployed? Is there any merit in them being deployed? What is the substance about their deployment? That should be the bigger questions, rather than the optics of whether people like the structure of Donald Trump's policies or whether they don't, and whether he's amplifying it through sport or not.
Well, it's more than optics, though, Simon, isn't it? Well, it's more than optics. People are losing their lives.
Well, sure they are. People are putting themselves...
Yes, Derek, you're saying, what would Simon think of one of ISIS psychopaths shot and killed an innocent World Cup spectator?
Well, first thing I would do is probably not run up to an ISIS officer and challenge them. I think it's unwise probably to challenge authority that waves guns around. I think that's probably an unwise thing to do. I would imagine there's a lot more than we know than the optics that we're seeing, because we seem to see things in a certain way presented by certain people with a certain
we don't
vantage
know the
point.
full story either.
No, we don't. No, we don't.
We don't.
And that's why I don't look at it from a judgment point of view. What I do look at it from the point of view is that Trump's policies, whether you like them or not, are very serious. He's been brought in on a mandate, and whether people like that mandate or not, one of the things is immigration.
A lot of them don't.
And they're entitled to not like it.
Right.
But you cannot present yourself as an expert in something and then come out with absolute tripe about empirical data. Empirical data is not one game. That's anecdotal evidence. If you go and say the entire tournament, the World Club Championship, had ICE representatives in every single game, and they took XYZ amount of people out, none of them had any business being taken out, that's empirical data. What they were trying to do is be facetious and arsehole clever because they thought they were in that position to do so.
The two professors that we engaged with. How will you feel, though? I know how I'll feel. How will you feel if we see at a venue ICE agents dragging off some individual to a van on the eve of a World Cup match?
How will I feel
this summer?
I will feel no way about it. I will assume there's a reason for them having done it. And if it turns out there's not a reason for them having done it, I'd like to think that ICE will be made accountable. I'd like to think in the same way that the various reactions to the circumstances in Minnesota have involved Trump engaging with the governor of Minnesota and sending one of these leading liaisons down there, has a consequence attached to it. You cannot act without impunity. That's the concern. What people are trying to suggest is the federal state is acting as without impunity. With impunity. And ultimately, if that's the case, then there should be concerns. We only hear the worst case scenario. We don't understand why they're operating in this way, and we don't understand the necessity for it.
The worst case scenario involves people losing their lives, yes.
Well, yeah, but Jim,
citizens.
But with respect, Jim, if you drive a car at a police officer or a federal officer in London,
we don't know that's the full story.
But that's what happened with that woman.
We don't know what the full story is regards Alex Petty. We don't know the full story.
We don't know it at all.
We don't know.
We don't know. But what I do know is if you put yourself in the way of a circumstances. I personally won't be getting myself shot anytime soon, because I won't be running up to a police officer, despite my disagreement with some of their views and some of their outlooks, and running up to them and challenging them in the way that some of these protesters think they can do. Now, does that mean that people have license and latitude to execute people? Of course it does not.
We hope
we're
this
not
never
privy
comes
to it.
here, though, don't we? We hope there's never a British form of ICE pitching up in a match day at your old stamping ground, Selhurst Park. We hope that we never see that, don't we?
Well, again, we don't have the same challenges. We have some very significant challenges, and I'd like to see us being far more robust about it. But we don't have the same
maybe not
challenges.
this robust.
But America is a very different country with very different borders. It's also a very different size and scale, and has very different challenges in terms of organised crime running through immigration challenges that they've got. So there's a whole raft of different things that they have to contend with, and so they deal with it differently. Quite frankly, I'm more inclined to go towards Trump's direction of saying, if we want to do something meaningful, rather than blow raspberries at the French and ask them to do something to help us, I'd rather have a more meaningful immigration policy that actually says these are our borders, we're going to protect them.
But just to be clear, if we pitch up at a World Cup match and we see ICE agents operating, that's no problem to you?
Not in the slightest. Because
Really?
I've got no concerns.
Yeah.
Why would I have any concerns?
You have no concerns,
But you asked me how I'd feel.
but their very presence sends out a message,
No, it
doesn't
doesn't.
it?
It would send out a message to me that actually, in a global audience, with the world the way that it is, with people that want to make awful statements and will potentially use a World Cup as an opportunity to do so, I might feel a bit more secure with some very significant security around the place, making sure that sort of thing doesn't happen.
I wouldn't have that feeling, but we'll be there.